Well, the legislature's back in session, and of course, that's always giving us an opportunity for, well, I would say a little mischief, but some interesting conversations, and something that we haven't done for a while, and it's always a pleasure to talk to the folks at the Civitas Institute, nccivitas.org, is they do a bad bill watch. And we've joining us this afternoon, Andy Jackson. He's a fellow, elections policy fellow at the Civitas Institute. By the way, the website is nccivitas.org. And you'll also find this story that we're chatting with him about today. Andy, good afternoon. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Let's talk here for a moment. I want to go over some other things as well. I understand you were at the Board of Elections today related to the decisions associated with the 9th Congressional District. Am I correct on that?
Yes, there were a couple things going on, but that was probably the big news item that they were having there.
All right. Well, let's get to that in a moment. I want to start with first the issue. I think this is a big issue, too, by the way, related to a bad bill watch. Senators want to make the will of North Carolina voters irrelevant. Well, one would argue that maybe Judge Collins has done the same thing in association with his decision to remove two amendments that the voters of North Carolina passed. But we'll put that aside. Let's instead talk about this story about senators wanting to make the will of North Carolina voters irrelevant. Tell us about this bill.
Well, what we have is there's this ongoing movement. It's been going on for a couple of decades now to try to form an interstate compact where several states get together and they'll say whatever the national popular vote is in a presidential election, every state in that compact would commit their Electoral College votes for that candidate, regardless of how the voters in their own states would vote.
No, wait. Hold on here for a second. So, Lockwood is running for president, and I win the race in North Carolina by a margin of 51-49. My opponent got 49% of the votes. I got 51% of the votes. But my opponent won the lion's share of popular votes nationwide. Am I correct on this description so far?
So far.
And that means that in the Electoral College, when it comes time to voting for the candidate, because my opponent garnered more votes in California, New York, Louisiana, name the state, the Electoral College will not vote for me. They vote for my opponent.
Correct. It doesn't matter how North Carolinians vote. North Carolina would award its Electoral College votes to the winner of the popular vote nationally.
I'm sitting here. Well, I know that you, Andy, voted for me. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Your vote's just been trashed.
Yes, it has. I mean, there's an idea that we should have whoever wins the most popular votes nationwide should win. Now, if we were a unitary system, like, say, France or Japan or something like that, it would make sense. But we're a federal system, and this is the way that our founders have set it up so that there is a role for states in these elections, and part of that is the Electoral College.
You know, there has been some interest, and as a matter of fact, I think Colorado is in the process of trying to eliminate or voiding its participation in the Electoral College. This is a big issue, and one I think we're going to have to discuss at greater lengths. The whole topic of the Electoral College, where is it? First off, is there a bill that's been presented in North Carolina that would, in fact, negate North Carolina's participation in the current system of the Electoral College?
Yes, it is. It's SB 104. It's currently in committee in the Senate. We don't know if it'll get out of committee, but they are debating it now. This is the second year in a row they've had it, and it actually passed the North Carolina Senate in 2007. Didn't get through the House, thank goodness. But this is not something that is out of the blue. This is something that had been passed in one house of the General Assembly before. So there's a real danger that if people get lulled in complacency on this, that it could somehow slip by.
You know, it also means in this process that North Carolinians are ceding control of the national election to the major markets, the Northeast, New York, Boston, the Midwest, Chicago, and that vicinity's there, of course, and throw in, let's do Philadelphia, Minneapolis, where you have large population centers down in Texas, and of course, without question, the country state of California. So that's interesting.
Right. So, I mean, North Carolina is a relatively large state where we are, I believe now, the 10th largest state in the union, but we don't have that kind of concentration of people. I mean, our brothers and sisters in Charlotte might disagree, but, they're the 23rd major media market in the country. So that would be an afterthought. That's the kind of thing that a candidate might stop by in Charlotte somewhere on their way from New York to L.A., if they have the time. But this, North Carolina right now is a swing state. The presidential candidates have to pay at least some attention to our issues and our concerns, and they come here regularly. That would drop down dramatically if we were to join this compact.
As a matter of fact, your article makes note of, really, quite frankly, the media markets, and of course, top of the list, without no surprise to anyone, New York and that surrounding area, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, Dallas, Fort Worth, Washington, D.C., Maryland area, which would probably also would incorporate Baltimore, Houston, San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose area, Atlanta, Georgia. I mentioned Boston earlier. Okay, Boston be separate media market. Phoenix, Prescott, Arizona area, Seattle, Tacoma, Washington. So I'm a candidate. I'm going to visit those 12 regions, those 12 markets, and I'm confident I'll pick up a smattering of support in North Carolina, Virginia. North Carolina, South Carolina, some of those areas. I'm also surprised that missing on these 12 is Miami, the Florida. But I probably I would be generous and spend some time in Florida.
It's a good time. Thing to do in late October. I think.
Absolutely. Well, it depends on who's running.
Well, it depends on the hurricanes. Yeah.
Well, no, it's also who's running the election boards and who's doing the counting down there in Florida. All right, this is Senate Bill 104. This is something we should pay close attention to, which in essence would negate, bestest term, basically eliminate North Carolina's participation in the Electoral College, whereby we currently, and what is the current process? We give our electoral votes based on the percentage of votes for the candidates?
Yeah, whichever candidate wins the popular vote in North Carolina gets all 15 of our Electoral College votes. Okay.
And
most states, we're winner take all.
All right. And by the way, the Electoral College is based on the number of congressional districts. Am I correct on that?
It's House and Senate combined.
House and Senate. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, it's 15. Okay, 13 House, and then, of course, the 2 Senate seats. Okay, very interesting. I want to come back to you in a moment here, Andy, since we're talking about elections and politics. I want to talk to you about the 9th Congressional District here in a moment, and we'll get with you. And if anybody's interested in making a phone call on this topic, they're welcome to give a call to us. 247-7282. That's a 252 area code, 247-7282, here on Viewpoints with Andy Jackson of the Civitas Institute, where he is the Elections Policy Fellow. Stay with us here on Viewpoints. Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107 AM 1240. We've had Andy Jackson on before, as a matter of fact. Very interesting conversations, and I will say to you, if you'd like to call in, he has the knowledge. We're talking about issues associated with the Electoral College and the process between a federal republic versus a sheer democracy, isn't it, Andy? I mean, we have a republic, so we have to consider ourselves with the representation of all communities, not just the largest voting block of that community. Am I correct on that?
Right. I mean, that's part of our federal system where we do protect some of the minorities, the smaller groups, especially the smaller states.
Yeah. All right. And by the way, this gets into the rural-urban divide as well. Okay, before we get to the 9th Congressional District issues, let's go to Joe in Emerald Isle. Joe, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Yes, sir.
Hey, how's it going today?
Doing well.
Good. I agree with the Electoral College. We should definitely keep it. I mean, there's no reason to get rid of something that I think does exactly things y'all described here in keeping everybody across the country involved in the entire election on a national level. However, it seems like some tweaks could be made to where percentages come into play within the states. And I think some states already do it where the delegates are split based on percentages.
Well, hold that thought, Joe. It's a very good point. Because I asked that question a few moments ago. Do all states treat it? And again, Andy Jackson with us with the Civitas Institute. And by the way, Andy, you're still teaching, are you not?
Yes, I teach government at Lewisburg College.
Right. I just remembered that as we were chatting a moment ago. But the question goes back to Joe, and I think it's an excellent question, Joe. Do all states treat the Electoral College votes as North Carolina, which is winner take all, or do the states divvy them up by percentage of the candidates that based on their vote totals?
Well, there's none that currently have a percentage proportional split, but there are two states, Nebraska and Maine, and they divide theirs by congressional district. Mm-hmm. So if you win a congressional district, you'll win that seat, and then the two that are based on the seats in the Senate, they go for whoever wins statewide. So in one example, 2008, in the district outside of Omaha, Nebraska went to Barack Obama. Nebraska's other four seats went to John McCain.
Okay. All right.
But every other state does it winner take all.
Okay. Okay, Joe, thank you. And I'm keeping you on. Well, my question for you really, Andy, is there a disadvantage? And Joe, my apologies, but you asked a great question. I want to follow up on. Is there any kind of disadvantage to that process similar to Nebraska?
Well, the only real disadvantage is if you have a situation, and I think Republicans saw this when they were doing their nomination contest for president. If you have states that are winner-take-all and other states that award their seats in some kind of proportional manner, that is going to give a disproportionate weight to the votes of states that are still winner-take-all. So if you're going to do something like that, awarding proportionally with anything but the very smallest states, you'd probably want to do that with some kind of compact rather than just have a legislature pass that by itself.
Okay. Back to you, Joe. And thank you for letting me interrupt you, by the way.
Oh, yeah, it's all right. It's all right. The reason I bring that up is the Electoral College's point is to include everybody's vote. I mean, at the end of the day, and that's on a state level. And the reason I say doing it proportionally seems like a tweak in this time and age where now we have so much more of a population in all these different states and so forth. It just seems like it would open the door to more votes counting. And I'm not even so sure that the congressional district is the way to go based on the way some places do gerrymandering on both sides of the aisle. I don't want to lay that on any one party because we know how it goes in blue states, red states, across the board. But like a state like North Carolina that's so, 50-50 almost in the last few elections, if you divided those delegates up between that, I mean, it would make for a tighter, more, in other words, 2 million more votes. Does it seem so? Well, for one candidate, does it seem so out of proportion compared to the Electoral College if it's tweaked?
What it will do, Joe, it will definitely motivate voters because they will recognize that if they don't show up in their district and they don't show up for their candidate, even though the candidate may win a popular vote, doesn't necessarily mean they'll win the Electoral College vote. And that's one of the issues. That's one of the values of having an Electoral College, because my vote really does count. But, Joe, that's an excellent question and observation, and I appreciate the call. I'm going to go to another question with him here in just a moment before I wrap it up. But thanks very much, Joe. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Andy, I'm going to get from you in a moment the issue of the 9th Congressional District. When is that race going to be conducted? But the other question really goes to this issue of the Electoral College. How close are we to having this become a kind of a national policy?
We're still pretty far away.
Okay. All right.
We've had about a half dozen states pass it. Now, it's not going to come into effect until enough states that total at least 270 Electoral College votes, which would be the majority, get on board. So there are states that are in the compact now, but it doesn't go into effect until enough states get to that point. And, Colorado, probably New Mexico are going to be joining up this year, but they've really kind of hit a wall as far as it seems, at least, about the number of states that are going to sign up. And there's an outside chance a few like Michigan might get on board as well. But as long as there's diligence within the states that are not members of the compact, that these things don't kind of slip by without much debate. I don't think there's a huge danger, but we still have to be diligent about looking out for this stuff.
We need to be diligent, and we need to be concerned. Senate Bill 104 in North Carolina is about what we're talking. Very quickly, Andy, when is the 9th Congressional District race going to be held?
Primary May 14th, and general election is either going to be September 10th or November 5th, depending on whether or not we need a runoff.
All right. Andy, stay with me. Thanks for being with us this afternoon here. Andy Jackson of the Civitas Institute on Viewpoints.